Today I'm going to give a brief overview of forced deportations experienced by the Kurds of Anatolia between the fall of the Ottoman Empire and World War II. In another video I covered Kurdish rebellions during this period, but I was unable to include this part of the story. My goal here is to show that a policy of demographic engineering was utilized by both the Ottoman and Turkish governments during these revolts, and at times sparked them. The first wave of deportations occurred during the First World War, under the Young Turk-led government of the Ottoman Empire. In 1916, shortly after the expulsion and massacre of the Armenians in Anatolia, the Young Turks turned their attention to the Kurdish population. To Turkify their remaining minority, forced deportations were utilized under the 5% rule. This ensured that the Kurds would not constitute over 5% of the population in any given area. Muslim immigrants called muhajir would then move in, replacing the expelled Kurds. It was decided that the muhajir would not constitute more than 10% of the region's population. It is hard to measure exactly how many Kurds were affected by the expulsions, but most scholars place the number at around 700,000, of which 350,000 died in the process. To put that number in perspective, the Ottoman military lost 320,000 soldiers killed during World War I. The Armenian genocide, on the other hand, dwarfs it with a total death toll of around 1 million. The second wave of deportations occurred under the Kemalist-led Republic of Turkey in 1925. Shortly after the Sheikh Zayed revolt, which was discussed in my previous video, the government created the Reform Council of the East. This council drafted plans to permanently deal with the threat of Kurdish separatism. Based on the recommendations presented to the Turkish Assembly, a second wave of deportations began from 1925. In 1927, a second law was passed, which continued the process. The British ambassador to Turkey at the time commented, quote, "The government has already begun to apply to the Kurdish elements the policy which was so successfully disposed of the Armenian minority in 1915. The death toll is again difficult to determine, but Kurdish authors estimate 500,000 people were forcibly deported, of which around 200,000 died in the process. Turkey continued this social engineering policy into the 1930s to, quote, render the Turk the master of the soil, as one Turkish parliamentarian put it. In 1934, a small round of forced deportations occurred around the area of Dersim, now known as Tunceli. This law was to create, as Interior Minister Kaya said, quote, a country speaking with one language, thinking in the same way, and sharing the same sentiment. The total number of Kurds deported was around 25,000, or 5,000 households. These were again replaced by Muslim immigrants from the Balkans. It was this process that provoked the Dersim Rebellion of 1936, in which Alevi Kurds rejected their removal. 40,000 people were killed in its repression. This was the last major revolt until the formation of the PKK in the 1970s. In the broader context of the 1920s and 1930s, the three sets of deportations that were utilized against the Kurds of Anatolia were not rare events. Demographic engineering had been carried out across both the Middle East and Europe by various states. Forced assimilation was sadly a common practice during this period. The same process was even experienced by the Kurds of Iraq in the late 1980s, and arguably continues today against the Palestinians. It is still undoubtedly an inexcusable tragedy on a colossal scale. But like many targeted groups throughout history, the Kurds have endured. The Kurdish identity today remains as vibrant as ever. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.